Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Creative Adventures. Today I'm working on a new project that would be a really good one for a beginner soap maker. I am doing a project with melt and pour. Now a lot of new soap makers start out with melt and pour and kind of graduate to cold process, which is what I've been doing all along, where I actually mix my own base oils with my lye, yada yada yada. You've seen the videos. Melt and pour uses a glycerin soap base that has already been made ahead of time. The lye has already done its saponification, it's done its thing, and it gives you an end product that is ready to use soap, but that can be melted down and hardened back up over and over again. So you can take a melt and pour base and add colors to it, add fragrance to it. You can put embeds in it just like you would cold process, but you don't have to work with lye directly, and it's also ready to use as soon as it hardens up. You don't have to wait the 4 to 6 weeks for it to cure like you do with a cold process soap. Now, melt and pour comes in a lot of different varieties. The two most common are just a plain clear glycerin base, which is what I have here already chopped up and ready to be melted. And then it comes in a glycerin base that has titanium dioxide already added to it, so the soap itself is actually a white opaque color. I'm going to be using both clear and white for this project. It also comes in other varieties from pretty much every soaping supply source out there. They have melt and pour bases that have goat's milk in it. They have shea butter melt and pour. There are lots of different varieties that you can choose from, but today I'm just using the clear and the white. Now this is actually my first time using melt and pour. Like I said, I just dove right in with cold process soap because I actually wanted to customize my soap to the maximum extent possible. But I saw a tutorial on the Soap Queen's blog for a striped soap using 2 different colors, well 3 if you count white, and it was just a really pretty looking soap. So I wanted my first adventure into melt and pour to be that soap. I will link to that blog post down in the description below and on my blog as well, so you can see her original instructions. I'm pretty much doing it verbatim. I'm not changing it any, but she doesn't have a video on this soap. She does just have a blog post on it. So first things first, I've got 3 containers of melt and pour already chopped up here that are ready to go in the microwave and be melted down. These 2 containers both have 16 ounces of clear melt and pour in them chopped up. This container has 16 ounces of white melt and pour. For the fragrance today, we are using Brambleberries, Amazon Lily, and Rain. The name of this fragrance really is true to scent. It does smell like it just rained outside, but it has a really, really nice note of lily as well. I think this is gonna be a really nice scent. It does kind of smell a bit like a generic soap scent to me. Not anything fancy, but I do think it will be very, very nice. For our colors today, both of these are also from Brambleberry. Since I was doing one of Soap Queen's own tutorials, I decided to go ahead and buy her own supplies for this just to make sure it works out exactly perfect, with the exception of the melt and pour, and I'll come back to that in a minute. But the colors that we're using today are Aqua Pearl Mica, which is really pretty, and Kermit Green Mica. And those are going to be layered with our white soap here. To prep the colors, you do this a little different for melt and pour than you do with cold process soap. So when I prep my colors for cold process soap, I usually pull oils out of my master batch and mix them up in these little cups before pouring them into my oils. But for cold process, you actually want to mix your micas with alcohol, 99% alcohol. So in each of these cups, I have a half teaspoon each of the color and a half tablespoon of 99% alcohol to prep them to go in the batch. Other supplies that you will need for this, this is being made in the 10-inch silicone loaf mold from Brambleberry. You will need a scale, a thermometer, a spray bottle of 99% alcohol. This is very important for this recipe in order to get the layers to stick together and to pop any bubbles in your melt and pour soap after you pour it. And then I just have some spoons for mixing my color and fragrance into my soap. Now, Brambleberry does sell melt and pour soaps. Obviously, they sell the entire gamut of varieties. I did not buy my actual melt and pour from Brambleberry though. I got this from Soaper's Choice. I recently went through the process of searching through all of my sources and gathering prices per ounce on all of my supplies that I buy regularly and finding the best price for my supplies. And I was already ordering a bunch of other oils from Soaper's Choice, and given shipping, it made the most sense for me to order my melt and pour from them as well, given their price and the fact that I wouldn't have to pay separate shipping. So they have a very good price on both base oils and melt and pour varieties. I did buy mine in 25-pound blocks though, so if you're looking for smaller quantities, you might find a better deal somewhere else. But I will be using melt and pour to make a lot of embeds for future soaps, so I went ahead and bought a pretty big quantity of it. All right, it's time to get soaping. So I'm gonna set these two off to the side for now. The key to layering soap, layering melt and pour soap, is temperature. Number one, as you're melting down your soap, you don't want to do it more than 30-second to 60-second bursts. And once you're starting to get melted, you really only want to do it at 10 or 15-second bursts because you don't want to scorch your soap. But on top of that, as we're pouring each layer into the mold, we're gonna let it set up for 5 to 10 minutes before we pour the next layer. But when you pour your second layer, you don't want it to be too hot either. You want it to be under about 125 degrees, because if it's any hotter than that, it's going to melt the layer underneath it and sink right through, which is not what we want. This is going to take some patience. There's going to be a lot of waiting in between pouring each layer. So I'm gonna start by going and melting this down, and then we'll come back and add our color. Okay. That took a minute and a half, so I did 3 30-second bursts, and we're completely melted down now. We're gonna add all of our aqua pearl mica to this container. And we're gonna stir that up really well. Another really cool thing about this clear melt and pour base is that micas are actually really sparkly. They have a lot of shimmer to them, but in cold processed soap, you don't get any of that shimmer because the cold processed soaps are opaque. But with this being a transparent base, it's gonna really look nice and sparkly. You can probably see how shimmery that is already. Okay, and we're gonna add a little bit of our fragrance. So I'm actually gonna put this on my scale here, and I'm gonna use a pipette to add it. Now with cold processed soap, we usually add a lot more fragrance than you're going to see me add here because the saponification process actually dilutes some of that scent. So you don't have to add nearly as much with melt and pour because you're not saponifying this, that's already been done. So we're gonna add 0.2 ounces of our fragrance. And we're gonna mix that in really well. We're gonna leave our scale sitting right here because in order to make sure we pour even layers, we're gonna use our scale to measure it out. So we're gonna pop our mold actually right on our scale. We're gonna hit the tare button. And we're gonna pour 8 ounces of this melt and pour. So we're gonna pour half of it. Oh, actually, before I do that, spray your mold really well with your 99% alcohol. This will help your soap actually spread out in the mold evenly. Oh, 8 ounces, perfect. Okay, now we can just set this to the side. And melt and pour always gets some bubbles on the top, so you're gonna use your alcohol to just pop them. Now we're gonna let this sit for 5 to 10 minutes until it gets a nice good film on the top because we want this bottom layer to be able to support our next layer. All right, it's been about 10 minutes and we definitely have a film on top. So I went ahead and melted down my white melt and pour. That's gonna be our next layer. But it is still a little too hot to pour because it's at 151. And remember, we want our melted soap to be below, at least below 130, preferably below 125 before trying to pour it. Otherwise, it's just gonna melt right through that film. So I'm gonna go ahead and add my 0.2 ounces of fragrance oil to this, and then I'm gonna let it cool down a little bit more so that we can safely pour it without breaking into our bottom layer. Get my fragrance oil back out and turn my scale back on, and we're adding 0.2 ounces. Let's mix that in really well. We're at 147, so it's cooling down pretty quick. So we're just gonna set this to the side. And since I am having to let this cool a little bit in between layers, and I don't want to have to keep moving my loaf mold on and off my scale, I'm going to go ahead and go melt down my last container of clear so we can mix the color and fragrance into it, and then put our loaf mold back on the scale and just leave it there. All right, to this last container of clear melt and pour, we're going to add all of our Kermit green mica. I just love, love, love how shimmery these colors are. And then once again, we're gonna turn on our scale and we're gonna add 0.2 ounces of our fragrance oil. So give that a good mix. Okay, now we can set that to the side. Well, let's check the temperature on our white here and see if we're cool enough yet to pour. I'm gonna guess no. Not quite, we're down to 141, so we are cooling down pretty quickly, but it needs to cool down another 15 or so degrees before we can pour this. So I'm gonna continue stirring this, try to help it cool down, and we will be back in a few minutes. Our white soap base has cooled down to about 123, so that should be just perfect. Again, this is my first time using melt and pour, so here's hoping that this goes well. Now, my bottom layer has hardened up nicely, so I think we should be good. So I've got my mold set back up on my scale. I've got it tared out. Now for the white base, we are actually pouring 3 layers of this, so you're not gonna use 8 ounces per layer. My batch is a total of 3 pounds. So for my white layer, which I made 16 ounces of, each layer is going to be 5.3 ounces. All right, so here goes nothing. Oh, I was supposed to spray that with alcohol. Oh well, I'll do it on that end. I'm pouring this really gently too, just to try to make sure I don't break through the bottom, and I also want to make sure I'm getting it nice and even. All right, let's give that a good spritz. So we're going to let this sit again for 5 to 10 minutes, and then we'll come back and pour our next layer. All right, our white seems to have firmed up a lot quicker than our dark green on the bottom did. So I think we're safe to go ahead and pour our next layer, which is the Kermit green mica over here. It's down to 124 degrees. So that is the perfect temperature. Let's turn my scale back on, and again, we're pouring 8 ounces of this one. And I forgot to spray with alcohol again. 8 ounces on the dot. Give it a spray. Once again, let's wait for about 5 to 10 minutes for this to harden up, and then we'll pour our next layer of white. Okay, we've got a bit of a film on our Kermit green layer, and our white over here is down to 125. I did have to pop it back in the microwave for about, I think I did about 15 seconds just because it had set up a little too much. Completely normal. If that happens, just pop it back in the microwave for 10 or 15 seconds max and then mix it back up. So that's what I did. It got up to about 135 and now it's back down to 124, 125. So I think we're ready to pour. I'm gonna remember my alcohol spray this time. We're gonna hope all these layers that I forgot to do that on actually stick together. All right, turn our scale back on. All right, there's nothing. Another spritz of alcohol. Pop our bubbles. And once again, we wait. Now while this is setting up for this white layer, I know it's gonna set up a little bit faster. As you can see, our blue that we used earlier has set up almost completely. So I am gonna have to pop this one back in the microwave as well. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that, get it melted back down, and then that way it has time to cool back down to 125 while this layer is setting up. All right, I melted my aqua pearl mica down again only for 15, no, I did this one for 30 seconds, 2 15-second bursts, and I've been letting it cool. It cools a lot faster if you stir continuously. So I'm down to 125. Our last white layer is firm, so give it a spritz with alcohol. And we don't have to turn our scale on because we should have exactly 8 ounces left. So we're just going to pour all of that right into the mold. All right, we're done with that one. Let's give this a spritz with alcohol to pop our bubbles there. And once again, we wait. Okay, for my final 2 layers, I have actually pulled my loaf off of my scale because we don't need it anymore. We have 1 more layer of white and we're gonna be using the remainder of this batch, and then we have 1 more layer of the Kermit green, and again, we're just gonna be using the remainder of it. So no need to measure these out. So let's go ahead and pour this thing. Let's give it a spritz of alcohol. Again, I'm going to very slowly pour this just to make sure I don't break through. That white hardens up real fast, man. I have a bit of a trail there on top. I hope you can't see that when we cut it. Last layer is our final Kermit green layer. Our white is nice and stiff now, and this is down to 126. So I think we are safe to pour and put this soap to bed until it hardens. Oops, almost forgot again. I love that shimmer, man. 1 last spray of alcohol to pop the bubbles on top. And this soap is done. We're gonna let this sit for 4 to 6 hours undisturbed to fully harden up. That is as long as it takes for this kind of soap to cure. Then we'll be ready to cut it, and it's ready to use immediately. So we'll see you back here later this evening and we will cut this bar up. Hey guys, welcome back. It has been about 2.5 hours. I thought that this would take 4 to 6 hours to completely set up. It did not take that long. Like I said, 2.5 hours, and I checked it and it was solid as could be. So I went ahead and pulled it out of the mold. I do have gloves on right now because glycerin soap gets fingerprints on it really, really easy. So this was just a good way for me to protect the soap. But yeah, this thing is solid and ready to be cut. This recipe doesn't fill up my loaf mold all the way to the top. So I normally cut my 10-inch mold into, or I have 10-inch loaves into 10 1-inch pieces. I'm not gonna cut this one into 10 pieces. I think I'm just gonna cut it into 8 because it's not nearly as tall as usual. I should also point out that for melt and pour soaps, you do not want to use a guitar string cutter, like the bud cutter that you normally see me use for my cold process soaps. That is not meant for cutting melt and pour glycerin soap bases. So you either want to use a good sharp knife, or I'm actually going to use a bench scraper. Alright, so I'm going to first cut my loaf in half. I'm going to try to be really, really even when I do this and push straight down. We'll see how that goes. And there you can see what the soap looks like on the inside. Super, super cute. Nice and refreshing scent. Kind of does smell, like I said, like a generic kind of soap scent to me, but it is very nice. It smells really strong in this melt and pour soap. You definitely don't lose any of the scent at all because there's no saponification happening, so it just smells really strong. It smells as strong as it does when you put it in. It smells really nice though. Okay, so now I'm going to cut those 2 pieces in half. It's really strange feeling cutting through this. I can feel the resistance from each layer as I hit it. It's kind of funny feeling. And then I'm just gonna eyeball the last cut and again, cut these in half. And there's what a finished bar looks like. hermit green on the top, aqua pearl on the bottom, and a really nice even stripe. How cute is that? And the beauty of this is that it's ready to go. I can start using this immediately. In fact, cleanup for all of my pots that I used earlier was super simple because it's soap. It's already ready to use soap. And all I had to do was throw them in the sink and they practically washed themselves. All right, all cut up and they all look uniform and exactly the same. Another nice thing about this soap though is that I don't have any end pieces that had to be shaved off. This is actually an end piece and it looks just as good as any of the other pieces because this type of soap does firm up so crisp and clean in the mold. Very, very happy with this first melt and pour project. These turned out super cute. All right, well that's all for today, guys. If you enjoyed watching this video, give me a thumbs up and please subscribe. And if you have any comments or suggestions for future videos or projects I should try, let me know in the comments down below because I would love to hear from you. So until next time on Creative Adventures.